What I tell dentists is any report you rely on, like one that you're using to check balancing, print yourself. As soon as we allow staff to be a filter between us and information, things go wrong.
Yeah, true.
So, doctor, print your own damn reports.
Yeah.
And there are some members of the audience who are listening to that and thinking, ooh, I might break something.
Cool. Well, Alex, I don't know how much I've actually told you about what's been going on at one of our offices so far, because we, at one of the locations, are actually dealing with an embezzlement case.
Yes, I know a little bit.
A little
this.
bit.
Yeah.
So basically, a few months ago, my regional manager, because we're part or group with a DSO,
Mm-hmm.
she came up to me and was like, "Hey, I need to talk to you." And I was like, okay. Like, my first head, I'm like, is a doctor quitting? What staff member is quitting?
Yeah.
Is she quitting? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, sure.
And so I have all these different things going through my head whenever people don't give you like a concrete answer on what they're doing. And then so she comes up and she's like, I haven't, really been informing you a lot about this, but we've been dealing with a previous employee who just told me she is no longer coming back. And the reason is we believe she's been embezzling money. And I was like, what? Okay, This is interesting.
Yeah.
So please tell me what's going on. So basically, she told me that over the course of the last month or two, there's been a lot of transactions going to DoorDash, like over $1,000 of DoorDash transactions. And she's like, did you do this? And I was like, yeah, no way.
Like to your office?
Well, that's what I asked her. So I was like, to the office? Is that what you mean? And she's like, we don't know. We just know there's like, $1,200 in DoorDash accounts in the month, like in this 3 week period, like from October to end of October.
Okay.
And I was like, no, I mean, we haven't ordered anything to my knowledge. And then she ended up looking up DoorDash and she found out it was all going to this individual's home. So I was like, yeah, okay, obviously.
Okay.
And then also we found out that our accounting department pretty much at that exact same time was emailing our regional manager and saying, how come there haven't been any cash deposits for the last 3 months?
Really?
I was like, okay, great. This is awesome. So right now we are in the middle of this big embezzlement case where, we think it's $5,000, which means, I don't know, you probably multiply that by at least 3 or 4, right?
I don't know.
But in the process of talking to the police, figuring out all that kind of stuff and getting it sorted out.
Oh.
And so then when this happened, I was like, this would be a good, interesting story to tell on the podcast. And I was like, we should bring someone on who actually deals with this all the time. So here's another, I feel like there's a common theme that there's somehow a lot of our initial guests are either Canadian or somehow are connected to a Canadian, married or whatever. I feel like everyone has had some weird Canadian connection.
Because we're awesome.
And yeah, right. So we decided to bring on David Harris. So thanks for joining us. And I figured you could maybe help me work through this.
I would love to. And yes, I'm Canadian. I kind of think of us as spies. We go and infiltrate the U.S. And sometimes you don't even know we're there till you start talking about ice hockey or something.
I know. Yeah, we perk up. And we're like,
Yeah.
maple syrup?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, what?
Yeah. Where we say certain words that give us away.
Oh yeah. We did that with Dante on our dental school buddy. We went through some weird words, and the weirdest one, like I told him, was the word mauve, which you guys say mauve, and I'm like, what? She told me mauve. And
It's
I was
mauve.
Like,
the color is
I
mauve.
was like, what the heck is mauve? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's spelled mauve.
Yeah. It's spelled how you say it. Exactly. Don't butcher that, please. Yeah. So that was pretty funny. I hadn't heard that one, that you guys pronounce that one differently.
Yeah. That's funny.
One of the ones, of course, is that when anesthetic is administered to a patient in Canada, they refer to it as freezing.
That is
which
true. Yeah.
Every Canadian can refer to, and of course, in America, you call it numbing.
Yeah.
You guys call it freezing.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Well, every Canadian pretty much has had the experience of going out when it's minus 8 degrees.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get that feeling on your face, and it's not all that different than what Ultracaine does to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like, hey, you survived that winter, you can survive this. Like, Yeah.
That's funny.
So yeah, that's pretty cool.
So you're
And then there are those people at -8 who can't help themselves, but they touch their tongue to something metal.
Oh yeah, that's like a rite of passage.
Well, I mean, does it get as cold? Because Alex is from Edmonton, where you're from in Nova Scotia. Does it get as cold?
No.
No.
The coldest it gets here is the coldest I can remember it ever getting was 0.
And that's Celsius. So
no,
like,
that's Fahrenheit.
Most winters it doesn't go below 15. I mean, we tend to be clustered right around freezing, plus or minus maybe 10 degrees.
Wow.
Today it's about 45 degrees here.
Okay. Wait. And to clarify, you're taught. This
He's
has to be. This
converted.
has to be fair.
You've converted nicely.
It's all Fahrenheit, man.
Yeah, Alex still refuses. Like if I look at our like any shared devices we have, everything is always in Celsius. So I'll look and I'll say like, oh, it's 20 out, and I was like, that's really cold. And she's like, no, it's actually pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I have not converted, and I won't. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I mean, I think a lot of our listeners probably already know who you are, but you have your own company that kind of helps out dentists when they get into these cases. So we figured, it would be cool just to kind of go through, kind of pick your brain on what we're dealing with, kind of maybe where we made some mistakes, where we could have improved, and maybe give some advice so other people don't run into the same situation that I'm currently in right now.
Yeah. And I feel like you're in like a mild case. Like if it was only like $5,000 or $7,000 or something like that, like I'm sure there are way more worse stories out there.
Oh yeah, because this didn't have that long. Like she had only been employed with us for like 4 months total. So I mean, I think there's also a point on like how much damage can you really do without being noticed in 4 months? And I don't know.
Yeah, time is one of the big limitations. I mean, I always talk about embezzlement being more like a dripping tap than a broken pipe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it happens gradually, and we see thieves typically once a year or more. We see a thief who got away with over $1 million.
What?
And they've done that, Eric, over a pretty extended period of time. I mean, that might be over 8 years.
Wow.
That somebody stole $1 million. But the average that we see, the average from our case files is over 100,000.
Jeez.
So
okay, so I shouldn't feel too
based
bad.
on what you say, you've gotten away easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And it sounds like your thief made some dumb mistakes that probably a better thief wouldn't make.
I would think so. Yeah.
So before this I gave you a little bit of a background on kind of what we were dealing with, but it seems like the basic points were there was the DoorDash part, right, which went to her house. So there was that piece, and then the other piece of it was the missing cash. But we found out that what was happening is she was filling out bank deposit slips. So we had like there was a record that she was filling them out, right? But then she wasn't taking it to the bank. She was, allegedly, right? I don't want to, but
sure.
Allegedly, let's put it this way. The money did not get, she wrote the bank deposit slip.
Yeah, but that's just like the cover. Like usually there's like a duplicate or something on it.
That duplicate part. I had
yeah, but it's like stamped by the bank.
Not by the bank. The part beforehand when she would put in and say, I'm depositing $1,000.
Yeah.
We saw all those at the office, and then she would take that slip, and it was supposed to get dropped off at the bank. It never went to the bank.
Yeah, but you never got the receipt of deposit.
No, that was an error on our part. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the two pieces of it, if that helps clarify
and
that.
There's a lot to unpack here, but let me start with a couple of things. First of all, most of the time when somebody calls us for help, we end up finding somewhere between 3 and 5 times what they had already found.
Ugh.
Wow.
So there's some possibility here, Eric, and you mentioned it a minute ago that this is the tip of a bigger iceberg.
Yep, exactly.
The second thing we know about thieves, and it was kind of partially proven in your case, is that there are very few thieves who only use one methodology. Almost everybody who's stealing uses 3.
Okay.
So if I had to place a bet, there's one more technique that you haven't found.
Okay.
Whether that's true or not, and what the quantum is, if there is another technique, is a good question. But there's probably a little bit more.
Is there a reason that it's 3? Is that like a psychology thing that people tend to do?
If I asked you what you did with your 401k money, am I likely to get the answer that you say, well, I took it all and I put it in Tesla stock or Apple.
Okay, no,
No,
you
you
diversify.
diversify.
Yeah.
Because, hypothetically, Elon could wake up crazy one morning and the stock might go down.
Yep.
Okay.
Or something could happen to a company that means that it's not as viable as it was. So with your investments, you diversify. Well,
Yep.
a thief is investing and stealing in your company.
Okay.
So they diversify too, and they know instinctively that if they only steal one way, it tends to stick out statistically. So they take a little bit this way and a little bit that way and try to stay under your radar.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
And
sense.
3 seems to be the number.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing too is like personality wise, like when this person was at our office, like really friendly, gung ho, nice with everyone. I mean, is that usually like a personality type that you see too? Is it that stereotypical like charismatic person that you tend to see?
Successful thieves, yeah. They tend to be people pleasers, and I'm going to use a gender specific term here, but they tend to make themselves the doctor's work wife.
Okay.
In other words, that person who makes your life easier, and the one about who you think, if she ever left, my life would be so much harder.
Okay.
When somebody can work themselves into that position with you, then the amount they steal can go up, because at that point you have just stopped questioning their trustworthiness.
Yeah, and I mean, and even for us, we can kind of talk about this maybe when we dive into like how we could have done things better. But me selling to, or us selling to a DSO last year, right? You take some of that stuff off your plate as being the 100% doctor owner. So when it came to either hiring or just processes and stuff, right? You are offloading some of that when you partner. And so I don't think I had my eye on the ball as much as I used to, or even like when Alex did, right? Because now there's just more layers. So I wonder too, it's like now there's more layers. So now there's more red tape, and now it's easier for things to get missed. And so I feel like that is something that also occurred in this situation.
I think 2 things. One problem that bites a lot of DSOs in terms of embezzlement, and a lot of solo practice owners think that DSOs are too big and too smart to get embezzled from. What afflicts a lot of them is what I call hubris. In other words, overconfidence. We're big and therefore we must be smart, and therefore our systems must be really good. It's pretty easy to steal from most DSOs.
Okay.
And their process breaks down in a couple of places. One thing I'll say about DSOs is the higher you go up the food chain in a DSO, the less the people making the decisions understand about what happens in a dental practice.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah.
And there are some definite discontinuities. The second thing that happens is that I think the DSO model doesn't fully consider something you just said, which is that when we sold to the DSO, suddenly we kind of took a step back from management. In other words, the DSO looks at your practice and says, okay, this is a well-run practice. Yeah, absolutely. We can invest in this. And then it's kind of like you're in a bus that's going down the highway at 50 miles an hour and the driver gets off.
Yeah. And it does. You're right.
What everybody hopes is that the bus keeps going down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that does happen, because I would say one, I guess, challenge, there's been a lot of positives too, right? But one challenge has always been, did you do this? Did I do this? Who was supposed to do this? Right. That becomes, even if you plan it way beforehand, you're like, and they say like, we're going to handle this, this, and this. And you're like, okay, but like I used to handle this, so I'm just dumping it off to you, but your processes and systems are different than mine. And then, so yeah, I feel like that has been a big challenge. And it seems like from what you're saying, that's a challenge that you see with a lot of DSOs. It's like when no one, what is that thing? Like when no one really, it's not clear who's taking responsibility for it. Like no one will do it, right? And I feel that's...
it's like give a task to 2 people and like no one will do it then.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
If it's everyone's job, it's no one's job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of DSOs, they have systems that apply in terms of certain things like hiring or how your individual practice interacts with the bigger ecosystem. Where a lot of them tend to be a little bit laissez-faire is in the internal systems in your practice. And again, in their mind, they bought a functioning practice.
Yep.
What they didn't necessarily fully consider was, like I say, the driver is going to step off the bus, and the bus is going to keep going down the road.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the systems that were in your practice at the time you sold kind of atrophy.
Yep. Yeah. And I did notice what kind of happens too, and then we can go into like our specific case on it, is it kind of, everything continues to work pretty well, but then when you get staff turnover and you go through like your second assistant or third assistant or fourth assistant, like you said, every time it seems to just atrophy a little bit more, because then you get where they're like, well, the doctor go through and do all this, and you're like, yeah, but I was doing that, but now is that really my responsibility? And so I have, that is a very like keen observation, that how you explain that atrophy part, that definitely holds true.
Yeah, and again, some DSOs are pretty rigid about how individual practices work, and they kind of have the cookie cutter, and they, if they acquire a practice, they remake it in their own image of how a practice should work. And there are others that say, we don't want to exert that level of control because it makes unhappy employees and we get turnover and whatever. So we're just going to kind of leave this practice alone as long as it's doing okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I agree with what you said, that will work really well for 6 months.
Yep.
And, with each 6 month interval after that, it will work progressively less well. And, 3 years from now, 3 years from acquisition, you can end up with a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into my case, if that's fine.
Like,
our
what
case,
do you do?
yeah.
No, it's not me. It was
yeah,
you,
I know.
No, when I ran my practice, like, well, I probably micromanaged everyone anyway, and everyone was probably scared of me also, but yeah, nothing like that ever happened. But I did things like I got my mail by myself, like I was the person to collect it and then I would distribute it to people. So like I always knew like what money, what checks were coming in.
You were on it.
I know to the penny where all the money was going. Yep. So, and I'd be like on them. Like,
I don't think you were never like mean or rude to people, right?
No.
Like I think you balanced that pretty well, where people, like between the two of us, if they were going to take advantage of someone, it was definitely me, right?
Yeah.
For sure. But I feel like even if there was something, like no one can ever be perfect, but you had good systems in place that I think people would have been deterred in general because you had so many safeguards and checks and stuff like that, that someone who might want to do stuff might look and be like,
it'd be way too hard. Yeah.
Do I want to deal with this? Or I guarantee you I can find another dentist down the street who wants to deal with it.
Probably.
So I think that was good that you did that.
Yeah.
But,
like triple check everything.
Yeah. But so I mean, if we go into our case, right, I kind of see it as those two parts there. Let's dive into the DoorDash stuff, because I think that part's kind of interesting.
So let's walk through a thief's decision tree.
Okay.
And I work for you, and I woke up this morning and I decided that I'm going to steal from you. So the question becomes, how do I do it? And the first set of choices is that I can steal on the expense side. In other words, I can create an expense that shouldn't be there, and DoorDash would be an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Or I can steal on the revenue side, which means patient payments and insurance payments.
Yep.
Okay.
Which one of those I choose, or whether I can do both, depends on access. So it sounds like she had access to a practice credit card.
It sounds like you're right.
and she used that.
Yeah, exactly.
And if somebody does have access to a practice credit card, then the expense side is open to them. The expense side is, for a thief, typically more dangerous, because expenses in your practice are scrutinized a lot better in most operations than revenue is.
Yep.
So, the DoorDash got picked up fairly quickly because somebody saw a credit card statement and they said, wait a minute, we don't order from DoorDash, and they investigated and all came unglued. So that was, in my mind, kind of a reckless way to steal.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it did take, though, so it took them a few weeks, because they had, when we talked to the DSO, they said, you don't get your statement until the following month.
Yeah.
And so since someone, if that was me or Alex, when we were owning the practice, I mean, like, it was either daily or weekly, we would look through our personal accounts and say, like, why is this in here? Versus at a higher level, I think it was more, okay, we'll check this monthly. So that's why I mean,
The takeaway though is whether you look at it daily or monthly, that's a very self-limiting theft.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was preordained basically to get caught pretty fast.
Absolutely. That's why she gave her resignation before kind of the credit card statement came out. Right?
Well, yeah, what happened is when she officially,
knew.
the credit card statement came out, and then she had gotten, I guess, called out for it, and she had said, oh, that must be, this is all hearing secondhand, right, from my regional manager. I never had a direct conversation with this employee about this, but she had said, it appears that DoorDash had an error. There's some issue with the card. I don't know. I didn't do this. I don't know where this is from. And then that's when they investigated further and contacted DoorDash and said, where were these deliveries? And they matched it to her home address and said, okay. And then she said, I won't be coming in on Monday. And then that's.
Okay. But, that's an aggressive theft, and it, it would be expected to be caught quickly, and it happened.
Yeah.
That's not something you could probably perpetuate for 3 years.
Okay.
There are other ways to steal on the expense side, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to get into specifics here. But if somebody was perhaps a little bit more artistic in how they stole, maybe they could have done something that would have run out a lot longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
For most thieves, the bigger temptation is the revenue side of your practice. So again, we're talking about stealing patient payments or insurance payments. Mm-hmm. Now, you talked, Eric, in the context of a cash theft, and to be clear, cash is every thief's first choice, but it's not their only choice.
Okay.
It is ridiculously easy for somebody to cash a check payable to a doctor or a practice.
Wow. See, I didn't realize that. I thought it was like stuff has to match, but if it,
yeah, and that was probably the case 30 years ago.
Okay.
It isn't now.
Okay.
And for that matter, it's not that hard for somebody to intercept a credit card payment. And again, I'm not going to get into how, or even to redirect electronic funds transfers. When insurance companies put money directly into your bank account, any form of incoming funds can be stolen. So again, following our thief's decision tree, the first question is revenue or expense.
Okay.
If I'm going to steal on the expense side, then the question becomes, how do I cover it up? So I always tell people that every theft consists of two parts. There's the stealing part, which is when your money becomes my money. And there's the concealment part, which is how do I hide the fact that I did it? And in the case of the non-deposited cash that you've found so far, the first question I, as an investigator, have is, all right, what did she do in practice management software while that was going on? Because that's probably going to lead us to more clues. And if I'm stealing revenue, my approach is the first question I ask is, does anybody who is above me in the food chain, do they conduct a reconciliation? So let's forget the DSO. Let's go back to when Eric owned his own practice.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The first question I'm going to ask is, at the end of each day or at the end of each month, did Eric sit there with a report that says, here's how much was collected from practice management software, and compare it to the bank?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. I mean, before,
I get the feeling in this
our
conversation that one of you did that and the other one didn't.
No. Yeah. No, but
my system was
yours was daily end of day report. We had to go through, you check all the payments, you check the insurance, and everything would have to match. They would have to present it. Once we partnered with the DSO, that was one thing we continued to do for a bit, but then, that was,
they're doing it, or they should be doing it.
Yeah.
So pulling on the plug on that would logically be one of the reasons you affiliated with the DSO in the first place. Yeah. But as a thief, what I'm gonna ask, the first question I'm gonna ask is, does anybody do that comparison? I can tell you that in probably 80% of non-DSO practices, the answer to that question is no.
Really?
And if I'm a thief and I'm in that environment, then stealing is so simple. Money comes in, I record payments in the software because that keeps the amount that patients owe pristine, and then I don't deposit it.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what, when we had it ourselves, Alex, your system was you would print off, wasn't it, how often would you go through the actual bank statements and have them make sure every single payment matched what was in the bank statement?
Every day.
Yeah, and you would go through and you'd get a merchant service thing and it might have multiple days on one batch and they would have to go in and make it all match. Every insurance payment would have to match with every single thing that was in the bank. And so,
Okay, but to be clear, Eric, I'm not talking about staff doing the matching. I'm talking about doctors doing it.
Yeah.
oh yeah, good point.
Okay, if your staff member is stealing, they're not going to flag their own out of balance situation.
Right. Yeah.
So that has to be done. If it's a DSO, it's a regional manager, or it's the head office accounting department who do this stuff. But if we're talking about a solo or a group non-DSO practice, it's the doctor. Asking your staff whether they balanced is kind of a pointless exercise if they're stealing, because of course they're going to.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's like if you're, I mean, if your wife is cheating on you,
that's like asking the fox to hold the keys to the hen house for an hour while you go to the gym.
Well, yeah, if Alex was cheating on me and I was like, "Are you cheating on?" No, right? She's gonna say no, but she's the one to yeah. So that answer is no, though, right, Alex? Yeah.
Well, we'll see. But yeah, even getting that report back to me so I could verify it. I mean, at least that's like helpful. Like for me to know, like, okay, I know that this is. I mean, I would look at my bank account all the time, though. So at least for me, that was never.
Yeah. Hey, quick break here. If you're enjoying Just a Couple Dentists, don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. It's the best way to keep up with new episodes and hear us argue about dumb stuff and complain about dentistry. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. Now back to the show.
Never a big thing.
But if, as I say, if you're a dentist, or if in your practice there is no effective comparison between what your software said you collected and what went in the bank, then as a thief, stealing is so easy. I don't have to be creative. I don't even have to understand your practice management software very well.
Okay.
I just record payments that don't get deposited.
Yep.
That makes sense.
The first building block in controls is that. The second thing that catches a lot of doctors and equally some DSOs is they forget that there are more than 18 days in a month. So what I mean by that is if your focus is looking at day end reports, and you make sure that your staff make sure that day end report balances, then the way I outsmart you is I come in on a Saturday and I do some stuff I don't want you to see, and I shred that report.
Yep.
So the second piece of a control system is what I call articulation. And I am very consciously borrowing a word from your vocabulary, because as soon as I say articulation, every member of your audience is picturing the mandible and the maxilla. What I mean by articulation is this. If your practice was open 18 days last month, so in one hand, you have 18 day-end reports from your software. Mm-hmm. And in the other hand, you have a month-end summary.
Yep.
If you added up the three key numbers, which are fees, adjustments, and payments from the 18, they should be exactly the same as for the whole month.
Yep.
Should be.
If they're not, somebody did extracurricular posting in your software.
Yep.
And that was stuff they didn't want you to see. So that's building block number 2. And then building block number 3 is to compare the monthly data to deposits. And my suggestion is for doctors doing oversight, do that monthly comparison. Don't even try to do it daily.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's less time consuming and actually more accurate, for that matter, to do monthly stuff than trying to do the daily thing.
Yeah.
So in terms of your embezzlement, some things I'd be, I'd flag here. First of all, there was a reliance on a subjective document when there is an objective one. And what I mean by that is somebody relied on that written bank deposit.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody's got online banking. Go online and see what actually went in the bank.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's objective. One thing I teach doctors is when there's a discrepancy, when they notice something that doesn't look right in their practice management software, what's their first response? They go to somebody and they ask.
Yeah.
Which is just like asking if you balanced today.
Eric.
What we encourage is go back to source documents. So you see an adjustment that doesn't look right, rather than asking somebody, well, what's this adjustment for? My response is, can you please get out that EOB for me?
Yeah. Be the detective. Yep.
That's objective.
Yep.
What somebody tells you is subjective.
Yep. See?
So
trust no one.
dig out the EOB. The other thing too, and your theft kind of touched on a corner of this. One thing that hangs up a lot of doctors is selective reporting. And showing you one bank statement when something else really happened is an example of selective reporting. Where it also comes in is practice management software reports. And for somebody who understands your software a little bit, it's really easy to print a report that doesn't tell the whole story.
Okay.
And what I tell dentists is any report you rely on, like one that you're using to check balancing, print yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, as soon as we allow staff to be a filter between us and information, things go wrong.
Yeah, true.
So, doctor, print your own damn reports.
Yeah.
And there are some members of the audience who are listening to that and thinking, ooh, I might break something. There's somebody somewhere who can teach you how to print reports in your software. And for the audience, that software is as important to your financial well-being as your handpiece is. So let's embrace that.
Yeah. And I mean, even with finding those reports nowadays, with how with ChatGPT being so popular and all that kind of stuff, I've sometimes not been sure what to run in my open dental report, and I'll just run it through some type of a ChatGPT, something like that, and it'll give me it'll give me good enough directions where I can take that information and then figure out how to do it, right? I don't have to call open dental anymore. I don't have to do that. So I think information now is readily available enough that if you want to find that kind of stuff, you can.
Yeah.
So that's true. And also, the practice management software companies have done a really good job of putting their manuals and their help guides and stuff online, because that's a whole lot cheaper than taking
totally
from lost dentists.
Yeah.
So yes, you're right. There's all kinds of information out there for a dentist who wants to do something and isn't absolutely sure how to do it.
And probably also having safeguards on your practice management software, like permissions and stuff like that. Some office manager isn't allowed to do this, this, and this. It's only you can do that.
It's important to right size people's permissions in practice management software. We see a lot of practices where all kinds of people are running around with administrative rights.
Yeah.
And what admin rights mean in practice management software is that you can break your own rules.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's got to be controlled. Now, dentists are their own worst enemies here. And the reason they're their own worst enemies is you're logged in the terminal in your private office, and then you go do a hygiene check. And when you do that hygiene check, you don't log out, which means that it's kind of like leaving a loaded pistol there.
Yeah.
And what I tell dentists is you should have 2 logins for your practice management software. You should have an operator login that basically has the same level of privilege as your receptionist.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
And you should have the admin one. And 90% of what you do as the practice owner can be done in that operator login.
Yep.
So stay logged in as that all day. And then if you need to do something that requires admin rights, log out, log in as admin.
Yeah. That's really smart. That's a really good nugget that I feel like I did not think about. Is really easy to do, because so many times, because I work with there's an associate at our office too, when we're trying to do notes and sign things at the end of the day, so many times I go to sign notes, and then I go to digitally sign it, and it has his name, and I'm like, oh yeah, he didn't sign out. I need to go sign out of his, sign back into mine. So yeah, I would imagine most dentists just leave their software up and don't sign out every time. So yeah,
they do. Yeah. And again, if you're doing that as a receptionist level login, that's fine.
Yeah.
The danger when you walk away from a logged in admin account is that what somebody else can do, they don't necessarily have to do transactions through your account. All they do is they elevate themselves to admin privileges, which, takes 45 seconds, and then they walk away, and now they're an administrator.
Yep.
I mean, I guess too, if someone was on your admin account though too, and doing that, then it looks like it was you that did it, right? Your audit trail shows that it was you, so they could be like, it was the doctor who did this.
And now you get into the other area of problem for dentists. A lot of dentists have their passwords compromised.
Okay, yeah.
And there are a couple of ways that it happens. First of all, I'm sure you guys know this rule. General dentists type with 2 fingers. Specialists sometimes can use 3. And what that means is if I watch you log in 3 or 4 times, I know what your password is.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3,
The
4.
second problem is that a lot of dentists have the same password that they use for
Yep.
their practice management software and their online banking and whatever.
and the alarm and the
no,
it's
but I
all
mean,
the same.
and
Yeah.
honestly, like to just quick aside on that, even when I onboard people still sometimes with our practice management system, I'll tell them like, you're going to be logging in and out of this all the time. Do something really quick and easy, right? And so that's probably bad advice then. I should not be telling them to do that because I guarantee most people probably just go 1, 2, 3, 4.
An interesting exercise in a lot of practices is go to the front desk and take the keyboards and turn them over and see what's underneath on a Post-it note.
Oh, really?
And a lot of times you'll find, people have stuck their own passwords there.
Yeah.
Which is equally bad. Yeah. So, and then there are other dangers to your password as well. One thing that we've seen used a few times is something called a keylogger. And a keylogger it looks like a flash drive, and you stick it into the back of a computer, and it just logs every keystroke.
Oh.
The best thing you can do is make yourself, without fail, change your password, at some reasonable interval, like every 2 months.
Okay.
And a lot of practice management software has a setting that you can set so that when you go to log in after 2 months, it will say, "Okay, doctor, time to change."
Yeah, there's an easy, even on Open Dental, like when we bring people in, you can like set to like reset password, right? And you just click it on, and then I think
there's like a prompt.
Oh, there's a prompt.
I think we disabled that.
You can set most software so that it will set a clock for each employee for 60 days, and when that clock runs out, it won't let them log in until they do a new password.
Okay.
If you don't do that, then when your password is compromised this year, somebody's still using it next year.
Yeah.
So one of the ways of limiting damage is to enforce password changes. And that's not just for you guys. I mean, that's for staff too. And they hate this because every 2 months they've got to learn a new password. But
too bad.
It's important to do that.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, no, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. There were some good
small things that
you can
don't require a lot of work.
So real quick, we were going to share with you, or Alex was, a fun story that we went through. Well, was this was this 6 months ago?
No, this was like a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So luckily I've never had an employee actually steal from me personally, but I have.
That you know of.
That you know of. I know. I was going to say that too.
No, not.
Don't.
I haven't. But I have been scammed before. And I think as a dentist, like in general, we can be kind of like a target. So this happened about a year and a half ago. And I was just driving in the car and I got a phone call from like a Denver area code number. And so I answered the phone and they said, "Hey, we're looking for Alexandra Cantor." And he said that he was Officer Dave or something like that from the Denver police. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, what's going on?" And he said, "You are summoned you were supposed to be in court today and you missed it." And I'm like, I didn't know that. And he said, "Yeah, you missed your court appearance and now there is a warrant for your arrest." And I go, "What? Like when I swear I never got anything in the mail or anything like that." And he looked through files and he's like, "Oh yes, it was delivered on this specific day." And I'm like looking through my calendar and I'm like, "That's a weekday. I would have been at home." I'm like, "I don't know where it would have been. Like I didn't receive anything." And I'm trying to picture in my head, did I place it somewhere? And he was like, "Yeah, that it was, it said it was received. And because there's a warrant for your arrest, you can either come in voluntarily to the police department, or if you don't, the next time you get pulled over or whatever, you will probably be arrested." So in my head, I'm thinking, oh my Lord, I don't regularly get pulled over or anything like that. But I'm the one case that I would, my kids would be in the car. What am I going to do? I don't want that to happen. So I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And he said, "Okay, so you need to come down to the station and tell them that there's a warrant for your arrest, and they will book you, and then they'll figure out what we need to do." And pretty much he was like, I guess they'll give you how much the bail is set at. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, "It's set for $9,000 cash." I'm like, okay. So I told him, I'm like, "Okay, Officer Dave, I have to go home to get my bank card because I don't have it on me." And he's like, "Okay, all you need to do is stay let me stay on the line with you so that I can track you so that I can.
Well, at this point, you're probably so stressed
well,
that
I'm just
anything
like,
he says to you,
I'm like, oh my Lord.
yeah.
So he was like, make sure I'm on the line still so that we know that you're voluntarily coming in. And so I said, okay. So I run home and I put him on mute because I have another phone, kind of like a Mango voice phone. So I call Eric and he's with the patient and I'm like, this is an emergency. Get him on the phone right now. And I'm like, Eric, there's, someone, the police called me.
You tell me this whole story.
Well, I'm like, the police called me and I have to go to the police station. And you're like, okay. And I'm like, and there's a warrant for my arrest. And you're like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, can you please come, like, help me with this? And you're like, okay, I'll finish up. Like, you're just very, like,
I was very nonchalant.
Very, like, whatever. I'm like, yeah, you're allowed to help. So I hang up and I leave and I'm heading over to the bank. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to the bank now. And he said, okay, so obviously keep me on the line. But if they ask you anything, don't tell them what this is for because they could freeze your account. Okay, so you need to make sure that you tell them, I need the cash for, you're buying like a car or something like that in cash. And so I was like, okay, I guess. But like when I went to the bank teller, they didn't ask any questions or whatever. So I got the $9,000.
Yeah, you took
So I actually got, yeah. So because I'm
like
so scared. I'm like, I wouldn't do anything wrong. I'm Canadian. Like, what? I don't understand.
And we have little kids at home and you didn't want to be in a situation
well,
where...
absolutely. And I even asked him too. I said, like, what is this for? Like, what? And he's like, I don't have access to your case. I don't know why you'd be called in to this court case or anything like that. And I'm like trying to think, like, why would I even have to be going in to do anything like this? But finally I get the $9,000 and I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm on my way to the police station and put it in my GPS and I'm on my way. And he's like, okay, now you have to stop at Walmart. And I go, wait, what? And he's like, you need to stop at Walmart because there's a kiosk for the bail money that you have to put in. And I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, I haven't been to Walmart in a few years. So I'm like, maybe this is a thing now. So he's like, you go to a kiosk and you put your license in, then put the cash and you get a receipt. You're going to take that receipt to the officer at the station and say that you paid your bail money and then they'll continue to process you and stuff like that. And I go, you mean like an ATM? And I pause and I go, yeah, right. And I hung up the phone and I turned around and I was like, there is no way this is going to happen. And I felt so stupid all the way back home.
Yeah. And me being the supportive husband, I just stayed at the office.
He was pretty glib. I mean, it sounds like he had the routine pretty well figured out.
Oh yeah. He answered every question that I had. And I didn't ask very good questions, but at the same time, he knew the process. It sounded believable, as far as like what I know, according to like TVs and movies about, like police and stuff like that. So I was like, holy moly.
Well, from what I remember too, is he really led into your like fear too of you have young children. They might come to your house and arrest you. And
no, he didn't say they'd come to the house. They would just say the next time you get pulled over, they're going to do it, which is, I think, like another kind of red flag. It's like, well, one, I don't think police call you on the phone and tell you that. Like, they kind of just, say, like, hey, there's a warrant for you.
How did they even get your cell phone number?
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
That was almost that was almost a $9,000.
I know. I was like, I feel so dumb. But I spoke to a couple friends about that, and they're like, yeah, they've had scams like that where they've called and they knew that they were like a dentist or something like that or a professional, and they kind of walk them through this thing either with like licensure or another part of that. And yeah, I just feel so stupid. Real quick. If you're into what we're talking about and want more, check out my newsletter, Just 2 Minutes. It's the dental blog you can actually read between patients. No fluff, no BS, just straight up tips, stories, and insights to help you level up. You can subscribe over at coupleofdentists.com or just hit the link in our show notes. Now back to the pod.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. Do you know other dentists who have gone through anything similar to that?
All kinds of stuff like that. And, there are different variants on it. There's the grandparent scam where, somebody calls a senior and, pretends to be their grandson who's in prison in Portugal and, needs money to get out. And, please don't tell mom and dad this is happening because I'm so embarrassed, and there are lots of variants on it. The thing to extract from this and apply to dentistry is the manipulation that happened to you there. So this guy understood what you would be fearful of and played to that. And, for a while it worked.
Yeah. Yep.
Thieves in dental practices kind of do the opposite. They make themselves, they worm their way into your life. And a lot of thieves in a solo practice will be, they'll offer to run your personal errands on their lunch hour, or they'll babysit your kids, and they really work their way into your family. So they're not playing on fear; they're kind of playing on need, but they want to make themselves indispensable.
Yeah.
And the way that we humans process trust is kind of interesting. When you meet somebody for the first time, in the first typically 45 to 60 seconds, one of the questions that your subconscious is asking itself is, can I trust this person? And if the answer you come up with to that is yes, then you kind of take that trust and you lock it away in a closet, and you never, ever bring it out again.
Yeah.
And to me, trust needs to be a more dynamic concept than that. There are people who were worthy of your trust at one point, and they're no longer anymore. And just as humans, we're very slow to recognize that.
And I wonder, that's just what an evolution thing, because probably back in the day when we were evolving, it was you had to make quick decisions. Is this thing going to eat me, or am I okay with it? So I think maybe we just had to develop like an initial screen of trust really fast. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and the difference between humans and wild animals is, if that wild animal is not trustworthy now, it's still going to be not trustworthy a year from now.
Yeah.
Humans are just a little more complex emotionally.
Yeah.
My dog will always trust me.
Yeah.
And, if I step on his foot by mistake and he yelps, then, 5 minutes later, he lets me pet him again.
Yeah.
They're a little less complex. So yeah, I think you're right. The caveman kind of fight or flight response is still there, but it just doesn't work as well with complex humans.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. No.
So trust no one, and don't answer your phone.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what I've
Final
learned.
observation, Eric, about your theft. One thing I heard is that the police are helping us sort this out.
Okay. Yep. They are.
And in our world, that tends to be laborious and unproductive. This can be a pretty technical crime, and they really don't understand enough about dentistry or open dental or how insurance interacts with patient payments to be able to offer much value in solving a crime. Typically, what we do is we find out what happened. We prepare what's called a loss report, and that goes to the police, and they just take it and charge somebody.
Yeah.
Because that is some of the challenges with it. Is they were saying, it would be hard to like. This case isn't that big, so I don't think I can bring this to, I don't know if it's the district attorney or whoever that is, and if they'll accept it. And, you guys can pursue what you want, but we may really not do this. And like, they've just tried to call her a couple times. Like it's been really slow. It's been a couple months, and they're still like, I have to follow up to say, is anything happening? And it's just like, no. Yeah.
What the police are good at, because the problem with embezzlement is it kind of runs contrary to their grain. What the police are good at is if you call them and say, somebody stole my car, and they say, give me the make and model, and you say it's a Ford Explorer, 2024, here's the serial number. And then they can either find your car or they can't, but they know what they're looking for. And the challenging question in most crime is who did it, not what did they do. Mm-hmm. With this one, it's the opposite. I mean, who did it. That was never much of a challenge. The difficult part is, what did she do? And sometimes the police will just explicitly tell you, look, it's actually not our job to tell you what was stolen from you. You have to figure that out. And once you do, we'll make sure the law's applied, but it's not really our role.
They don't find the proof, right? It's not.
No, somebody has to hand it to them. And a lot of the place where we add value is being able to take this complex crime, distill it down to something that a police detective or a jury or a judge can understand and act on. And if you don't get that level of understanding, if you don't explain the crime in that way, then it's going nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
The police
Yeah, that
will
is
prosecute a $5,000 theft if it's crystal clear what happened.
Yeah.
If it's kind of murky, then they'll say, well, we don't really deal with something that small.
Well, that makes sense because when we were talking to him about it, and we said, well, like with the DoorDash stuff, and we said, oh, well, there's this, and there's like proof of receipt that it was delivered to her house, right? They're like, oh, okay, like these all line up, so it's a little bit easier versus like the other part I think was tougher because it was a little bit murkier, like you said. So yeah, that all makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, one of the calls we get that's very frustrating, and just illustrates this murkiness is when somebody calls us and says, my office manager's been stealing through payroll. And, she's supposed to be paid $32 an hour, but I looked in the payroll records the other day and she's given herself a raise to $42 an hour. And the question I ask these people is very simple. Do you have anything objective that shows what she should be paid? Do you have an employment contract? Do you have an email that you sent her a year ago where you said, congratulations on your performance, I'm raising you from $30 to $32?
Yeah.
Do you have anything like that? And the answer in most cases, as I'm sure you know, is no.
Or it's no, we talked about it and she was happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I tell them, to prove a crime, we have to be able to prove what was supposed to happen, and there was some deviation between that and what actually happened. And if we can't establish that starting point, we just can't prove anything, and the police won't touch this.
Yeah.
In other words, nobody's going to jail over an unprovable difference of opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's all interesting. I mean, this is pretty eye-opening. It obviously gave me some good pointers on what I could have done better, I guess, and so yeah, I mean, I guess it's an ongoing thing. So I'll keep you posted, and we'll keep everyone, I guess, here posted on what ends up happening. And if there's one takeaway, right, it's that there are 30 or 31 days in a month, right? Not 18. Everyone remember that. Not 18 days in a month. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, David.
Enjoyed the chat.
Thanks.